Were Ineos Britannia robbed in what many believe to be the race of the century? Certainly the best race we've ever had in AC75s. The big question mark, multiple penalty calls from Ineos against the Italians. None of them going the Brits' way. Italians staying cool and collected and seeing out the win under huge amounts of pressure. It was a fantastic race, but everyone's asking about the penalties and why they were made the way they were made. So I'm going to walk you through those decisions, explaining why I believe the umpires made the decisions they did. But also, I think in one case they were still probably wrong. Let's get on to the main event of the pre-start. It was this situation where Rosso were on the starboard boundary trying to bear away around the front of Ineos and complete their jibe to return to the line, whereas Ineos were trying to create a leeward overlap to put them in the position as right-away boat and pin Rosso out away from the start line. They weren't in the boundary zone, so it was a pure windward leeward or port starboard. And the key situation here is Ineos were coming from astern and to leeward, and they needed to create an overlap with Rosso's transom to make them the right away boat. So when Rosso are clear ahead, they can do what they want, but as soon as that overlap begins, then Rosso should avoid. And it was so tight. So first of all, let's have a look at the incident. This is the teams chasing down the boundary. And the question is, in this whole sequence, when did Ineos get the overlap? So here, it looks like Ineos do have an overlap and Rosso are the windward boat. However, there's a few things. In normal match racing rules, there is a rule about whether you're on port and starboard in terms of when you go downwind, when you jibe, has your sail filled on the new jibe. So there is a little bit of wiggle room. As you're jibing, you have to keep clear of the other boat, whereas in the America's Cup racing rules of sailing, that is different. In this kind of what's a windward or what's a leeward boat, basically it's just which side the wind is from. When you look at what tack they're in, literally the moment the true wind passes from one side of the transom to the other, instantaneously they are on the other jibe. So presumably this was green flagged because Rosso had completed that jibe onto starboard before Ineos had the overlap. Now, if you look at this image here, it certainly doesn't look like Rosso is on starboard from the way the sails are set. Certainly the main is still dished as if the wind is coming from the port side. But there's a bit of a telltale sign that the jib is starting to fill from the other side. So this is probably around about the moment that they went from port jibe to starboard jibe. And obviously as soon as Rosso are on starboard, and Ineos are still on port, then Rosso are the right away boat and they can then move away from that boundary. So the big question is, are Rosso on starboard or port? Do Ineos have an overlap before this moment? So let's delve into the data on this. So here are the two boats sailing towards the boundary, and the question mark is, when do Ineos have an overlap? So this is 37 seconds to go, and it looks like Ineos. So if we look at the line from across the transom, and it's the stick off the back of the transom, but a line out, it looks like 37 seconds. For me, Ineos just don't quite have an overlap, and the jib is still on that side. And if we look at the data of all this, it's actually quite interesting. So in terms of the jibe, so you should jibe about 180 degrees from the wind directions. That's when your transom goes through. So the true wind direction on Ineos is 207 degrees. The true wind direction on Rosso is 216, and the true wind direction on the nearest mark is 218. I think the rules umpire app is going by the true wind direction on Rosso, which says they should jibe when the bow goes through 36 degrees heading. Now, if we bring up the data at the bottom, and the question is, at what point does Luna Rossa pass through around 36 degrees? If we move along, that's 33.64, 36.8. So that is around, so that is 36 seconds to go. So at 36 seconds to go, that is when they become the starboard boat on starboard. And the sail's still not swapped over sides. But at this point, I think they're just... It's so tight. It is so close as to who has an overlap. Like, this line across the back is square, and then you're taking it from the rudder. It looks like at 36 seconds, Luna Rossa are the windward boat, and they are still on port jibe at this point. It is right on the limit between when they're on port and when they're on starboard. So I think the umpires will believe, because this is an instantaneous jibe. It's not like the match racing rules where the sail actually has to fill on the new side. It's just the instant that transom goes round through the eye of the wind, which is coming from up there, and you can see they are pretty much heading. There you go. You see the jib flip over there. But by that point, Ineos are definitely overlapped, and Luna Rossa shouldn't be turning down into them. You know, I think it's marginal. I think when you look at it, Ineos possibly did have an overlap. Probably half a quarter of a second. It'd be great to see Richard Slater on the umpire app take us through it, because, man, I think this was so tight. But that wasn't the only rules incident of the race. No, it was absolutely action-packed. We had two other calls from Ineos for protest, and I'm kind of talking about Ineos here because Ineos were calling the protest, but I must say Luna Rossa was so cool in this race. The previous race they were disqualified whilst they had people on board swapping main sails. Tension must have been heightened, but honestly, Jimmy and Keko are so cool. And I just felt like there's two calls I'm going to show you for windward leeward with Ineos going up the beat, where Luna Rossa attacked in front of them and Ineos went for the hook. And again, I'm going to be accused of favouritism for the British. I think both of them, they have an argument. Both of them, I think they have an overlap, or certainly have an overlap. When you look at this one, make this full screen to better show you. When we look at this, Ineos are definitely overlap, because it's from the end of the transom. Ineos are definitely overlap there, and they go for this little nudge up, and that's how close they get. That's the back of the boat. Now, they won't have intersected the trapezoids, but at the back of the boat, the trapezoids stretch out past the foil arms, but at the transom of the boat, they're right in on the corners. So if they were... basically, they would have had to hit Luna Rossa here with their spinnaker pole to get a penalty. I think that's pretty dangerous in the rules. But I also kind of think Ineos were coming through with quite a lot of pace here. They're going 8 knots quicker, 5 knots quicker, 3 knots quicker, and they just go for this push up, I think, fractionally too early. I think they just had to wait a second long until the overlap was more established before they did the luff up, because obviously the luff up costs them a few knots, and then they're going slower, they're in the gas, and they drop off. I think they needed just to charge a little bit through that overlap. But man, it is so tight. Like the umpires are really kind of, I don't want to say they're asking for a collision, but in this instance, like, how close are Ineos to the corner of that boat there? Jump on to the last call, and that is on the second beat, and this one was Dylan Helming, and again Luna Rossa attack in front. Ineos charging from behind, and so Ineos come up, and I think they bear away there first of all. I just think again, they've definitely got the overlap. So, I mean, they're kind of bearing away before they've got the overlap, but now they've definitely got the overlap, and they head up again. You see the boat just taking these little nudges up to kind of be like, oh, penalty, penalty. But they don't come up far enough. But again, like, these boats, I don't know why the graphics have gone so crap, but these boats are so close. Like, what do the umpires want? Like, clearly Ineos have got the overlap, and if they just keep on heading up, they will definitely be able to make contact with Luna Rossa. I don't know whether the umpires are looking for a more sustained and more gradual head up from the kind of attacking boat, the pushing boat. Really close calls. You let me know what you think. Are these rules a little bit dangerous? Are they asking the boats to get too close before they call a call? And also, let me know in the comments below if you think Jimmy and Keko are the coolest customers out there, because I have never seen a boat defend a lead. I mean, basically for 2 laps, it was neck and neck, and the Italians were, tell you what, some of the best defensive sailing I have seen. Some of these, the call, to get that call on the tack and just be able to hold off that windward leeward shout is phenomenal sailing from the Italians. So yeah, we are being treated to a lineup of the ages. Like, I thought American Magic against Luna Rossa was a good match, but this is proving to be every bit as good. Right, that's it for me. Enough excitement for today, and looking forward to more racing next week. See you around.